Hello, welcome to Football-Oranje podcast number 20. It's a bit different this week because we're recording only for the second time our live podcast. We're in Den Haag, The Hague in the Netherlands, and I'm here with regular James.
Hello.
And our special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, special guest?
Hello, thank you for having me. It's an honour to be part of the Football-Oranje broadcast podcast. My name is Jeroen Thijssen. I am the Dutch head football manager researcher, so for the computer game called Football Manager. I've been doing that for about 15 years, I think. I'm responsible for the entire Dutch research and how it eventually gets into the game. So players, teams, statistics, attributes, the whole lot. I'm based in Den Haag, so that's also partially why we're here. We're sitting in front of the Binnenhof, which is a very nice place to do a nice podcast.
Yeah, so you can stalk exactly where we're sitting. And I'm going to be with you later, Jeroen, at the Oude Den Haag Heerenveen game. I mean, by now it would have been played. We're releasing this podcast shortly after it's recorded. I'm here with James and Jeroen because I was at the NAC Breda Sparta Rotterdam game on Friday. It's a great atmosphere there. I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but it's just not the same seeing it on the TV. Like when you're actually in the stadium, it's fantastic. And on Sunday, I'm at the Kelp for Feyenoord against Willem II. What's the atmosphere going to be like at the Kyocera Stadium tonight? Or has it got a new name now?
I think it's still the Kyocera, but I think it's the 1st of September that they're going to change to the new sponsor name, which is going to be the Cars Jeans Stadium.
Is that linked to the owners?
Yes, the main sponsor really. I think they just bought the stadium name. Apparently, it's for a bigger amount of money than Kyocera were willing to offer, so that's good for the ADO club. Well, you experienced the Avondje NAC yesterday, so that should have been good. I think they're quite happy to be back in the highest league in Holland. You'll get ADO Heerenveen this evening. It should be decent. The ADO fans are quite enthusiastic generally.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed as well with just Dutch football fans in general. It's just a lot more enthusiasm. There's a lot more passion to it, and I think if anyone listening thinks, I could go and see a game in the Netherlands. I spoke to one on Twitter, and I think it's a thing to do. But just come for the weekend and experience a few games because the atmosphere is just something different.
You also have a lot of choice when choosing where you want to go. You've got Rotterdam, you've got Amsterdam, you've got The Hague. Some people even go to Eindhoven. I won't be attending the match in The Hague tonight between ADO and Heerenveen, but I have been to the stadium before to interview Edouard de Plan, so I've seen inside of it and the press office rooms and things. So I hope you have a great time and should be a good game.
Cheers, James. Right, well, let's get started the podcast. And this time we usually do questions at the end. Oh, I should also mention, of course, we're available on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes as usual. You can always send in us some questions, and our Twitter handles will be in the descriptions on all our platforms. We're going to start then on a question for a change. And it's concerning Kasper Dolberg because there's been an offer from Monaco this week, which has been turned down, quite a lot of money. And it says it's from Elder Pigeon. I think it's a French guy. He says who could replace Dolberg if he leaves to Monaco? Would Huntelaar be enough with only Eredivisie to play? And that opens a can of worms, doesn't it, about Ajax as well and their season ahead. Who wants to answer that?
I think with it being so late in the window, I think it may well only have to be enough, because whether we'll have time to find a replacement at such short notice. I think with the money involved, it's quite natural that Ajax were going to turn down the first bid, but also from Dolberg's point of view, having had such a great season last season, when a team like Monaco comes in, where he can train in such an environment, where he can play in a strong league, he can be part of a strong squad, it must be very attractive for him also. So I think a lot's going to happen between now and Thursday, but I think if Dolberg was to go, I would be surprised if Ajax would have enough time to find an adequate replacement.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting question. It's going to be quite difficult for Ajax to find a solution if they do let Dolberg go. If they can recoup maybe 50 million euros or 60 million euros or something to that extent, I'd probably do it.
But they're not going to spend it though, are they? It's Ajax.
Well, the thing is, they've sold Sanchez for 40 million. They got a replacement in Rowe for, what was it, 7.5 million, so they have about 30 million left. They can reinvest, let's say, another 30 million, which they can get for Dolberg. If they have their scouting done, they can definitely get another striker in for, they have 60 million to spend. I mean, they need a few more players. They don't just need another striker, they need another midfielder, they might need another defender as well. But divided by 3, they can get a good striker for 20 million. They can get Vincent Janssen from Tottenham. If that doesn't work out, yes, they have Huntelaar. Huntelaar is fine as a first striker in the Eredivisie. He's going to score 15, 20 goals. That's no problem at all. They won't have another backup. Well, they have Cassiera, but Cassiera is still a question mark, leaning towards a failure. But give him some more time, he'll get some games in for young Ajax. That's not necessarily bad, but you don't want to build on Cassiera. We've got another kid coming up, Kai Sierhuis, but I don't think he's ready yet. So if they do let go of Dolberg, which for the right amount of money I would still do it. They have Huntelaar, but they will need another striker. I think someone like Vincent Janssen is an easy solution. I mean, you can get a lot more creative than Vincent Janssen, but he'll get the goals for Ajax. But they definitely will need to have in their scouting network some kid in Brazil, some kid in Colombia that's worth 15, 20 millions that will have to fit in.
Okay.
I think there's time.
Yeah. You say Huntelaar's good enough at Ajax, perhaps the amount of games, and it could cause a few injuries, and they were just a second striker. But speaking of Huntelaar, I have a question here from Derek, and he wants to know that if Huntelaar can put himself back into the first frame picture at Ajax, can he come back into contention for the Dutch squad? We've seen Van Persie come back, and he hasn't done a lot since, disappointing for Fenerbahce. So, does this mean the door's open for Huntelaar and a new striker to come in to the Dutch squad?
Probably, yeah. I'm against selecting Van Persie. I understand Advocaat's reasoning. He probably sees Van Persie as a leader, and I think he's hoping that France versus Holland is going to be a tight game. I honestly think that France will win 2-0, 3-0, something like that. You never know. It could be a close game. Maybe it will be 0-0, 1-1 after 60, 65, 70 minutes, and he can bring Van Persie on. Maybe Van Persie can bring some magic. I think that's the two reasons why he brought Van Persie along: experience, and maybe he can be that guy that still has something to offer, like a Sneijder, who can't play 90 minutes, but he can have that spark of brilliance. I also think Huntelaar's... I don't really think you need another striker that's getting on a bit, picking for your Dutch squad. It's difficult. You have Dost, you have Janssen. Dost is not working out. Janssen, even though his track record for Oranje isn't bad, I think he's on 13 caps and 7 goals. That's decent, but he's not a great Oranje striker. And you have Van Persie, who's getting too old. Huntelaar is getting too old. I think you need to move on. I personally play a completely different system. I would actually pick a 5-3-2 or 3-5-2 kind of system, and I wouldn't rely on any of the aforementioned players.
So is that because you think that 5 at the back will help with France, or is this more of a direction for the team in general going forward?
It's a difficult one. I think it would help against France. I think it would surprise them, and France have some absolute quality players, and I think that you can hold them back a little bit better if you have 3 central defenders. You have your wing backs that can help out in defence, but they can also provide the opportunities in the offence. I think for France, they're that good that you have to bring a little bit extra. Normally, Bulgaria and Sweden are countries that you should be able to beat. We were unfortunate against Sweden. An unlucky goal disallowed, which was a goal. Bulgaria was just complete nonsense, but yeah, that can happen sometimes. But normally, you're better than those two.
Yeah, that's proved to be a difficult campaign, hasn't it? And I don't know what you think about this, James. Do you think they've got a chance against France with the squad they've announced?
No, I don't think so. But my point goes back to the very beginning when the draw was initially made, when you knew that facing Bulgaria, Sweden and France in one group was going to be difficult. you can also draw comparisons to the Euro 2016 qualifying group where they faced Turkey, Czech Republic, Iceland. You know, these are teams that had something to offer. I think Advocaat has fallen back on experience with selecting Van Persie, hoping that experience is going to be key in getting a positive result. Whether Huntelaar can be selected in future squads remains to be seen, because I think that has more to do with the direction that the national team is going in. Because regardless of whether Advocaat will stay until after the qualifying campaign, whether he'll stay on after that, whether he'll leave immediately afterwards, if somebody new comes in, will they want to look at youth, will they want to have a different system? So I think that'll be interesting come the end of the qualifying campaign.
Yeah, I think the situation with Advocaat is that he will leave if we don't qualify. That's 99% sure. If we do qualify for the Euros, then he will stay through to the Euros.
It's tricky overall, though, isn't it? Because he's in a very difficult situation, and it's hard to pick up the team. But it's been this way for so long now, where they don't seem to pick up the results they should be. Even though, yes, the player quality has declined since the 2 World Cups that we've seen. They got to the final, 3rd place. But the quality of the players even then wasn't one of the strongest in the world, in Europe. Obviously very good players, but what's happened since then, and you know, why has it taken us this long to sort of turn the situation around? Why have they found it so difficult?
I think the lack of transparency from the very top has proved the problem. As I've stated in previous podcasts, the kind of in previous years would always go after the candidate they wanted, always putting the interest of the national team. That is the most important thing, and putting the interest above anything. And 9 times out of 10, they've got the candidate they want. And I think in this case, the lack of transparency, the dilly-dallying between candidates and speaking to many different people. I just think they've lost their way a little bit. They wasn't as cohesive as a unit in terms of a national football association as they have been in previous years.
And you know, it all comes down to this one match, this crunch match against France. It's going to be away in France as well. It's not at home. It's not, for example, in the Calps if they use the fans. It's going to be an extremely tough game. They have to win, otherwise it's relying upon a very unlikely result. But looking at the French squad here, there's all sorts of talent up front, and you can just see goals. There's no way that the Dutch are going to keep a clean sheet, you wouldn't think. The only other way is to sort of outscore them, I suppose. And you could look at the defenders there. Maybe Koscielny will get a game, James' favourite. But yeah, it's a very good squad, and I always think that maybe in the midfield I find it very difficult. Pogba and Conte are going to start, and the Dutch midfielders, for example, Wijnaldum, Strootman, Klaassen, they're going to find it very difficult to play against them. What hope do we have of winning the match?
I'm not very confident, but maybe, if you need to be a little bit lucky, you get a penalty after 5 minutes and the goalkeeper gets sent off for those kinds of things. No, I think France squad is definitely better. I'm not incredibly impressed by the defense. So the Holland squad will get opportunities. On the other side, they do have a good midfield and they have a great attack. I mean, I'm not sure if Lacazette's going to play, but I mean, they've got Griezmann, they've got Lacazette, Mbappe, they're just phenomenal strikers. And that's also why I initially said that, you know, maybe we just need an extra defender, because if we play with the 4-4-2 as we usually do, we also need the midfield to help out defensively. That's also where we failed recently. I mean, for example, Strootman was also, De Ligt got a lot of slack against Bulgaria for the goals Bulgaria scored. Yes, admit it, he wasn't very fortunate in both situations, but I think we need to look further and also notice that Strootman wasn't doing his defensive tasks. Zoet is not a commanding leader in the goal. That's also a problem for the Dutch side. If everybody's fit, you have a decent attack. You have Robben. Robben is always something special. But it's not the one player that you can have your focus on, that you can count on.
It's not like it used to be. And even then it was a good team effort. But let's say going forwards, you two are the KNVB. What would you do? Who would you hire? Because for me, Avocart leaves if they lose to France, or perhaps a few matches after that, once it becomes more important again. The new manager needs more time to bed things in, to change things. What would you do?
If I was the Canberra Bay, I would go all out for Koeman. I think Everton have put themselves under enormous pressure, and Koeman has also put himself under pressure by spending vast sums of money in the summer transfer market. I think that's Everton flexing their muscles and their newfound wealth. If results do not follow and expectations that have been raised are not met, then things could go south very quickly. I think if the Canberra Bay are strong enough to be proactive and to spot the early signs of that, and maybe even court Ronald Koeman, to become national team manager is not a task which is put away for lots and lots of different people. And Koeman felt overlooked when Hiddink was given the job. As the Canberra Bay, I would go all out to sell it to Koeman, but this is what we want to offer you. This can be your future. And I think if they spot the signs early, if things are going awry at Everton, and they sell it enough to him, coupled with his own personal ambition, I think that could be the best way to go to building a cohesive unit and a national team that will be able to compete once again in the future.
I think Koeman is one of the better managers that you could perhaps potentially still clinch. It's going to be difficult. A lot of people were thinking about big international names, but that's not going to happen. I mean, the Dutch FA has a set amount of money available for the Dutch national team manager. I think the salary will be, well, actually I'm not sure what the salary is, but it will be too low for the really big names. Okay, they can up that a little bit. I mean, if you can offer $1 million, you can offer $1 million, 1.5 million, maybe you can offer 2 million, but that's not going to get you Jose Mourinho. That's going to be impossible. I think Koeman is a decent shout, but it really does depend on how things fare at Everton. I know that deep down he still wants the Holland role. He's indicated that several times, even though he's been mistreated a little bit in the negotiations. But yeah, somewhere along the line he'll still want it. But if he goes the distance with Everton, if they still do well, it's not going to be up for grabs. And I have one more name on my list. He's been at Utrecht for a while, but I think Erik ten Hag, he's been phenomenal. I think it's his third season at Utrecht. I think 1 or 2 seasons down the line it will be time for him to make a move, make a change, bigger club or maybe the national team.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Erik ten Hag, he's my favourite manager in the Eredivisie. Someone asked me the other day who they'd have as the Villa manager, and I said, it's this guy Utrecht, Erik ten Hag. He's very good tactically, for a start. He'll polish rough diamonds, or for want of a better phrase, turn shit into gold. He'll make good players out of nothing, and that's what the Dutch national team needs. But yeah, I just don't think they go for someone like him. He's not a name as such. Having looked at the managers I had in mind last time when Avocart was appointed, it was so unimaginative. And even if it was a foreign manager, they weren't particularly talented in my opinion.
I don't think a foreign manager would be extremely well received in the Netherlands personally. And I think experience at international level is key. I think Ten Hag is a good manager, there's no doubt about that, but it's a natural progression for him to maybe take a step up to a bigger club and to prove his worth even more before being linked with national team job, something like that. To go back on the point of the salary, I think in the past I've heard some figures banded around that the national team manager's job commands a salary between 600,000 and 1 million euros. I think, like Jeroen says, they can up that to get the man they really want over the line, but it's about finding a balance. I would much prefer that they go with the long term in mind in getting the national team to be able to compete again, rather than a turgid few couple of years that they've had in recent years.
I want to liven the discussion, but we've got another problem at the moment in Dutch football, not just the national team. I'll use a question here to open it up. We had a question that said, Dutch football is going through difficult times, club and national team level. So what's the salvation out of this mess? Now this came after Ajax were knocked out of the Europa League on 4-2 in aggregate to Rosenborg from Norway. Very poor result, but having watched the match, Ajax perhaps were a little unlucky, but the 3 shots on target for Rosenborg were goals. So my point there would be perhaps is it a style of play issue for Dutch teams in Europe? Because why are we now only left with Feyenoord and Vitesse out of the 5 teams? Of course, they didn't have to qualify, but Ajax got knocked out, Utrecht, and PSV. Of course, PSV, which was also embarrassing. So there's another issue. So what can we do going forward? Because if teams are looking forward to qualifying for Europe, it's going to be a lot harder to actually get into the main group stages, because next season we're already facing the automatic group stage spot being lost for the Champions League, and the season after that, at the moment, it's looking like the Netherlands will lose its second Champions League spot altogether. What can we do?
I think there's loads that needs to be done. Out of this season, the current teams that played in Europe, only Utrecht did all right. I mean, they lost out to Zenit, St. Petersburg, after extra time, and they held their own. And, they really did well. But that's the team that wasn't required to actually do anything. Utrecht was the weakest of the 3, so to speak. And, okay, they did all right. PSV didn't. You should have beaten Osijek. Ajax didn't do well. Nice was a tricky one. Okay, you can lose that one. They didn't have luck on their side. Okay, fair enough, can happen. Rosenborg was another team they really needed to beat, because Ajax normally is better than Rosenborg. And if you did watch the games, yeah, Ajax had more opportunities. Ajax were ahead 2-1 actually in Rosenborg, and then Yunus hit the post. If it was 1-3, the game would have been done, and it would have been an okay reflection of the match. But as Mike said, Rosenborg had 3 shots on target. All 3 shots on target were goals. That's something that I see a lot lately. And I'm not sure if it's mentality or if it's tactical awareness or lack of tactical awareness, but Dutch teams get beaten so often. They'll have ball possession, they'll play nice, attacking, smooth football. Very nice to look at. Look at the skills, very good, very nice. They'll create some opportunities, but they won't score because the strikers are just not good enough. And then a lack of concentration, a lack of tactics, or a lack of coaching, and bam, the Dutch sides lose. It happens so many times. I think that is one of the aspects that needs focus. Tactics, awareness, defence. And then it goes way beyond that. You have your youth systems, you have your scouting, you have the very fun debate on proper grass or artificial grass. Everything counts towards each other. There are maybe 10 or 15 things that you need to focus on to bring the Dutch football back to where it needs to be. And no, it's not going to be able to compete with the top European sides. The Dutch sides cannot compete with English, German, Spanish sides, but we're falling into obscurity right now, and that's something that definitely doesn't need to happen. If you focus on all the parts that you need to focus on, and I'm touching on this really, really shortly because, yeah, we could be sitting here for hours, but you can make a big step towards being a lot better than you are right now. But it's going to be very, very difficult. If you look at the draws that Feyenoord and Vitesse have had as well. Feyenoord are in a group of Shakhtar Donetsk, Napoli and Man City. I don't believe they'll qualify. Vitesse are in a group with Zulte Waregem, Lazio and Nice. I don't think they're going to qualify. That's definitely a problem.
My first point on the European debate is, when looking at the results of the Europa League and the Champions League, the first thing that springs to my mind is how the gap between the well-known European teams in terms of reputation and the lesser European teams that in some cases people have never heard of is getting smaller and smaller and smaller year upon year. Maybe it's ignorance in terms of certain opponents where clubs think they can take certain clubs lightly. Being at the home game of Ajax against Rosenborg had one chance that resulted in a goal in which they won the game, and Ajax spurned a lot of chances. You'd all made some very good points about the setup and how things can be put right, but it's about getting your house in order and allowing things to develop, and going back to basics in terms of the strengths that they used to have in the past. Like, for example, not so long ago, that players didn't necessarily leave the country at a really, really young age to go and sit on the sidelines in Germany, Spain or Italy or France. Now it's as if as soon as the first offer is made, the bags are packed and they're off. There doesn't seem to be any patience anymore from the players, from the agents, even from the environment that they're playing football in. Patience to say, hang on a minute, this is where I'm playing my football. I need to earn my stripes here. I need to find my place, and then if I'm performing well and gaining a reputation, then maybe an offer will come. I think for Dutch clubs to only have now 2 representatives in Europe is a damning indictment, and Feyenoord are going to struggle in that group, especially with the away days. I think in Donetsk and Napoli and Manchester, and Vitesse, they may well spring a surprise at home against Nice or Lazio, but I think in the case of Vitesse, it's about them enjoying the experience.
I agree they're going to find it difficult, but I don't agree with Feyenoord's group. I think Feyenoord's group is one of the kindest out of a lot, mainly because they can beat Shakhtar home and away, in my opinion. And then after that, that means they could finish third, at least. Okay, I do agree that Man City and Napoli are much more difficult teams, but looking at Man City and how inconsistent they can be at times, who knows, especially at home. And I think that Feyenoord are the main hope here, because I agree with what you said, James. It's going to be very difficult. Nice, Lazio, Vitesse. But let's see what happens. I think, in terms of performing in Europe, Feyenoord have what PSV used to have a couple of years ago, where they have that strength, they have that ability to actually defend. If they've got a lead, they'll defend it. Ajax didn't do that against Rosenborg. They got 2-1 ahead, didn't shut up shop. They tried to go for a third, and whilst I admire their style of play, there's a time and a place, and if they need to start defending, they defend. They defend that result and they keep it. Didn't happen though, and they got knocked out. Utrecht, it was admirable again, but Zenit St. Petersburg were too good, and I think their look of a draw comes into play. And a few years ago, it happened quite a lot with Dutch teams drawing particularly difficult teams. When PSV drew, was it Bayern Munich and Atletico Madrid, both in the Champions League? That's almightily hard to get through. But at least Feyenoord got a chance there against Napoli, who are a good team but aren't the best in Italy, and Man City aren't the best in England. They spent a lot of money, but can still be beatable. I guess the final point for me on this whole European issue, it's going to get a lot worse. I had optimism for Dutch football reclaiming something after Ajax got to the Europa League final. It made me think that teams like PSV would put in that effort to beat Osijek from Croatia, but lost home and away. And for example, Locardi after the match, and Michael Bell said it last time on our podcast, how he was shocked, and I was shocked as well, that Locardi said, I wasn't motivated to play this Croatian team in the Europa League because I kind of fancied playing Bayern Munich instead. You're not playing Bayern Munich, you're paid to do a job, and you'd think that after the Europa League performance at Ajax that they'd be a bit more motivated to do so, but obviously not.
I think in the case of certain opponents, I think ignorance can be called into play. As soon as that draw was made with PSV facing Croatian side Osijek, within a few hours it was never mind about them, we're going to be progressing around further, and then we'll look ahead to that. Still had 180 minutes to play, and the shock to lose in Eindhoven and to not go through and to not be able to turn it around in Croatia. I think because the gap of European teams domestically in Serbia, in Azerbaijan, even in Austria, because the gap is getting smaller and smaller. There's ignorance coming into play where we've never heard of some of these teams. We don't have to we don't have to bother all of them. There was a Slovenian side, I think Domžale, they held Olympique Marseille to a draw. Olympique Marseille are arguably the biggest club in France in terms of history and charisma, and a team from Slovenia managed to hold them to a draw in the first leg. So I think clubs also have to be aware of the teams they're facing, and even though they're not seasoned European names, they have to do their due diligence to make sure they prepare accordingly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Locadia, that was just, for me as well. I mean, I'll speak for James as well. We're getting on a little bit. We're getting a little bit older, and I cannot understand why Locadia would even think that. Okay, I can imagine. Hey, we're playing Osijek. Yeah, fine. We should be able to beat them. You should still be motivated. If I turn that around to it, though, if I consider myself an Osijek player, I would think to myself, okay, I'm playing at a decent team in Croatia. So Osijek has always been third, fourth, fifth in Croatia every single season. If I play well, if we beat PSV, and if I'm that striker to score 3 or 4 goals, I'm actually going to earn myself a contract to the Premier League. And I think that kind of drive is what set Osijek apart from the lack of drive which Locadia was showing. Yeah, you want to play Bayern, yeah, that's fine, don't we all? But before you can actually play Bayern, yeah, you will have to beat your Osijek. And if you actually, as a Locadia, who's definitely a decent player, but if he plays well, and if he scores 3 against Osijek, if he scores 3 against Neftchi Baku, to name an Azeri team, then other teams will go, hey, alright, that's a decent player, we'll think about him.
I think a good example for the Dutch league to follow would be the Belgian league, because of the surprises they've come up with the last couple of seasons in Europe. If you look at the UEFA coefficient, how they rank the leagues and all the places, Champions League and Europa League, Belgium are 9th, and that puts them in the top 10, which is where the Netherlands need to be really in terms of their league standard. They won't sit 11th, but it could get a lot worse this season. Could even drop down to around 15th.
Austria's on our tail, I think.
Yeah, especially with Austria Vienna winning, and they're going through to the Europa League group phase.
It'll make a big difference, won't it? But Belgium are high up, and yeah, if they can get enough points like they do, then that's what they should aim for. I think as well Turkey. After seeing, I think there's only 2 of their 5 teams left in Europe right now, just like the Netherlands. It's a little mini crisis there as well, because a team like Fenerbahce couldn't get through.
Yeah.
And think how much money they've got. Their top 3 is much richer than the Dutch top 3. And as well, further down the league, there's a lot of good professional seasoned players that play in Turkey, perhaps for the money. But it does make the league stronger.
Definitely for the money, yeah.
It's definitely for the money. I don't think it's for the weather.
The problem with the Turkish sides though is that they often bring in has-beens. They bring in players for their name. So definitely there are some decent players in Turkey, but there are a lot of players that really aren't that good anymore. But they've been signed. Oh, this used to be a good player. So that is a problem for Turkish football. Although that they have really big clubs. Galatasaray basically does Fenerbahce, even 2 or 3 teams that are upcoming. Definitely so. Belgium, I'm not really a fan of the Belgian clubs either. I mean, I'm not convinced that their whole new league structure is the way forward. I'm glad that the Dutch league hasn't gone that way. Yes, the Belgian clubs are doing okay right now in Europe, but they face the same predicament as the Dutch clubs. All the good players leave, and that's also something that you can't prevent. I mean, Hakim Ziyech at Ajax could probably still be here 1 or 2 more seasons, but if you look just below that, Sanchez is gone, Davy Prupper has moved on, Klaassen has been in Holland for quite a while, but still, ideally you keep those players longer. The same issue is there in Belgium. For this Criado moves from Club Brugge to Brighton for crazy money.
I agree with Jeroen's point about being pleased with the Dutch. They did not go down the same route as the Belgian FA in terms of altering the league structure. I think in terms of Turkey, I think Galatasaray lost in the previous qualifying round to Östersunds from Sweden, and Fenerbahce losing, I think it's Fardus. Again, I think ignorance comes into play. I think where they haven't maybe done their due diligence to think, regardless of whether we're facing a team we've heard of or not, we've got to make sure that we're ready, and we've got to make sure that we qualify. Also, the question of pride, being able to take part in the competition, being able to raise the name of the club, being able to help the reputation of the club get bigger. Jeroen just touched on Davy Prupper. It wasn't so long ago that he was linked with a move to Zenit St. Petersburg, and he admitted himself that his head was turned, and he did suffer in terms of the games he played after being linked. With him signing for Brighton, it's highly likely that such a promising young Dutch player could well be a championship player this time next year, and this was a player that not so long ago was linked with one of the biggest clubs in Russia. So that also tells the story.
I totally agree. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, James and Jeroen.
All right, thank you for having me.
No, you're always welcome back. And don't forget to leave a like for us and comments, see what you think. Give us your opinion on Dutch football matters at the moment. And subscribe if you're new. Thanks for listening.